Get your black ass away from that house right now. Caroline Sullivan's voice ripped through the quiet street. She stood on her lawn, designer sunglasses perched on her head, phone aimed like a gun. I've called the police. We don't let thugs roam around here. This is a good neighborhood. Brandon Noble turned slowly from his own front door, key still in hand. His voice came out calm, steady. Ma'am, I live here. This is my house. Liar! I've seen you casing this place for weeks. The Harrisons would never sell to someone like you. Neighbors emerged onto porches. Phones rose, recording, watching. Brandon's shoulders dropped slightly. He'd been here before. Different street, same script. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Have you ever been accused of a crime in your own home, simply because of the color of your skin? 3 weeks earlier, Brandon Noble had signed the closing papers for 447 Maple Drive. No. Wait. He'd crossed out that number. Bad luck, his mother always said. The realtor found him 412 Maple Drive instead. Same street. Better energy. The house sat in Oakwood Heights, 45 minutes outside Washington, D.C. brick colonial. 3 bedrooms. A lawn that actually needed mowing. It cost him nearly everything he'd saved in 15 years, but it was his. His neighbors didn't know that yet. Oakwood Heights wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a statement. Gates at the entrance, security cameras that actually worked, an HOA that sent violation notices if your grass grew half an inch too tall. Houses here started at $800,000 and climbed fast. The marketing brochures called it family-friendly and increasingly diverse. Brandon had seen exactly 2 other black families during his walkthrough. Both seemed to avoid eye contact. He should have paid attention to that. Brandon pulled into his driveway at 11 on a Saturday morning. His black Honda Accord looked modest next to the BMWs and Teslas lining the street. He wore jeans and his Howard University hoodie. A baseball cap covered his close-cropped hair. He popped the trunk. 4 boxes waited inside, each labeled in his neat handwriting. Kitchen, bedroom, office, books. This was his 5th trip this week. Always during daylight. Always visible. He'd waved at the woman 3 doors down twice already. She'd stared back both times, then disappeared behind her curtains. That woman was Caroline Sullivan. Brandon didn't know her name yet. Didn't know she'd called the police 6 times in the past month. Didn't know that 4 of those calls involved black or Latino contractors working on other people's homes. He just knew she watched. The previous owners, the Harrisons, were an elderly white couple who'd moved to assisted living. They'd left behind good memories and better neighbors, according to everyone Brandon asked. The house had sat empty for 2 months, long enough for the lawn to yellow, long enough for the mailbox to overflow with junk mail, long enough for the neighbors to wonder who would buy it. They'd assumed someone from the community, someone who looked like them, someone whose presence wouldn't require adjustment or thought. Then Brandon's offer came through. Cash sale, quick close, no complications. The for sale sign disappeared overnight. The neighborhood Facebook group erupted with speculation. Caroline Sullivan had posted first. Does anyone know who bought the Harrison house? I haven't seen any moving trucks. Seems odd. 12 comments followed, all variations of the same question. Who? 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 Nobody asked Brandon directly. Nobody knocked on his door with a welcome basket. They just watched. Brandon grabbed 2 boxes from his trunk. The morning sun felt warm on his shoulders. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed. A dog barked. Normal Saturday sounds in a normal neighborhood. He'd wanted normal for so long. 15 years as a deputy U.S. Marshal meant 15 years of abnormal. Chasing fugitives across state lines, protecting witnesses who'd testified against gang leaders, living in hotels and rental cars, always moving, never settled. This house was supposed to change that. He walked up his driveway, boxes balanced in his arms. His key ring hung from his pinky finger, jangling with each step. He could see his reflection in the front window. Just a man coming home. But that's not what Caroline Sullivan saw from 3 doors down. She saw a threat, an invasion, a violation of the unspoken rules that kept Oakwood Heights exactly the way she liked it. She'd been photographing his car all week, posting vague warnings online. Suspicious vehicle on Maple Drive. Same car, different times. Stay vigilant, neighbors. Nobody had connected the car to the new homeowner, because nobody expected the new homeowner to look like Brandon. He reached his front door, set down one box to free his hand. The key slid toward the lock. That's when Caroline's voice shattered everything. Brandon had handled armed fugitives. He'd stared down gang members with nothing to lose. He'd kicked in doors at dawn, adrenaline screaming through his veins. But nothing prepared him for the particular violence of a white woman's fear. Nothing prepared him for what happened next. "Get your black ass away from that house right now!" Brandon's hand froze. The key hung an inch from the lock. He turned slowly, carefully. Hands visible, non-threatening. Caroline Sullivan marched across her lawn like she owned the entire street. Maybe she thought she did. Her yoga pants probably cost more than Brandon's monthly car payment. Her highlighted hair bounced with each aggressive step. "I've called the police. We don't let thugs roam around here. This is a good neighborhood." Brandon took a breath, let it out slowly. This conversation had a script. He'd lived it before in parking lots, grocery stores, his own college campus. The script never changed, only the location. "Ma'am, I live here. This is my house." "Bullshit!" Caroline's face flushed red. Spittle formed at the corner of her mouth. "I've been watching you case this place for weeks, sneaking around at all hours. The Harrisons would never sell to someone like you." Someone like you. 3 words that carried centuries of weight. Brandon's neighbor from 2 doors down emerged onto her porch. Mrs. Peterson, according to the mailbox. She clutched her purse to her chest like Brandon might sprint over and snatch it. Her phone was already up, recording. "Ma'am," Brandon kept his voice level. Calm. The voice he used with frightened witnesses. "I purchased this property 3 weeks ago. I have the closing documents inside. If you'll just let you break in?" "I don't think so." Carolyn pulled out her phone. She held it up like evidence. "I have photos of you, dates and times. You've been stalking this house." More neighbors appeared. Mr. Davies from across the street, a young couple Brandon didn't recognize. The Carter family stood on their porch but didn't come closer. Their faces showed something different from the others. Not suspicion. Sadness, maybe. Recognition. I wasn't stalking anything. I was moving my belongings into my house. "Your house." Caroline laughed, sharp and ugly. "You can't afford a house on this street. What did you do? Steal someone's identity? Forge some papers?" Brandon's jaw tightened. He'd apprehended fugitives wanted for murder. He'd testified in federal court against cartel members. He'd received commendations from 3 different U.S. attorneys general. And here he stood, being interrogated on his own property by a woman who'd probably never faced a real threat in her life. Sirens grew louder. 2 patrol cars rounded the corner, lights flashing. No sirens now, but the lights painted everything red and blue. Brandon's heartbeat kicked up. His training screamed at him, hands visible. Don't reach for anything. Stay calm. Comply. The first car stopped at an angle, blocking his driveway. Detective James Mitchell stepped out. White. 40s. Hand resting on his belt, close to his weapon. His partner, Officer Davis, emerged from the passenger side. Younger, nervous eyes, hand also near his holster. They didn't approach Caroline first. They walked straight to Brandon. "Sir, step away from the door." Mitchell's voice carried authority, the kind that didn't expect questions. Brandon stepped back, hands at his sides, visible. Officers, I'm the homeowner. This is a misunderstanding. Sir, we received a call about a burglary in progress. Mitchell's eyes scanned Brandon head to toe, taking in the hoodie, the baseball cap, the skin color that made everything suspicious. Do you have identification? I do. It's in my wallet. In my back pocket. Keep your hands where I can see them. Mitchell moved closer. I'll retrieve it. The humiliation burned, standing on his own lawn while a police officer searched him like a suspect. Neighbors watching, phones recording. Mrs. Peterson whispered to Mr. Davies. Their words didn't carry, but their meaning did. Mitchell pulled Brandon's wallet from his pocket, flipped it open, read the driver's license. Brandon Noble, 412 Maple Drive. Mitchell looked up. Suspicious still etched in his expression. This address? Yes, sir, that's my address. I own this house. Caroline pushed forward. Don't believe him, he's lying. Check for wants and warrants. He's probably got a record. Officer Davis spoke into his radio, reading Brandon's information, running his name through the system. Brandon knew what they'd find. Nothing. Not even a speeding ticket. But it would take time, and during that time, he'd stand here, watched, judged, guilty until proven innocent. Mitchell held up the license. Sir, having an ID with this address doesn't prove ownership. Could be fake. Could be stolen. My closing documents are inside the house. I can show you. You're not going inside anywhere until we verify your story. Mitchell's tone hardened. For all we know, you broke in earlier and planted fake documents. Brandon's hands curled into fists, then released. Control. Maintain control. Officer, I understand you're responding to a call, but I haven't committed any crime. I'm standing at my own front door with my own key. Then you won't mind waiting while we verify that. It wasn't a question. Caroline's voice rang out again. See? He can't prove anything. I told you. Check the house for stolen items. Gregory Sullivan appeared from somewhere down the street. Caroline's husband. Tall. Soft around the middle. Arms crossed over his polo shirt. He stood beside his wife, saying nothing. But his silence was support enough. Ma'am, did you actually witness this individual breaking into the house? Mitchell asked Caroline. I saw him trying to unlock the door, with lockpicks or something. With my key, Brandon corrected. He held it up, still in his hand. This is my house key. Keys can be copied, Caroline shot back. I watch crime shows. I know how this works. Officer Davis's radio crackled. No wants, no warrants, record is clean. Mitchell's expression didn't change. Clean record didn't mean innocent, not in his math. Sir, I'm going to need you to sit on the curb while we sort this out. Sit on the curb. Brandon repeated the words slowly. You want me to sit on the curb. At my own house. Sir, don't make this difficult. The crowd had grown. 15 people now, maybe 20. Some filming, others just staring. Entertainment for a Saturday morning. The Carter family's father took a step forward. Officers, I think there's been a mistake. Sir, please step back. Davis held up a hand. We're handling this. Mr. Carter stopped. His wife touched his arm. They exchanged a look Brandon recognized. The calculation. Is it worth it? Will speaking up make things worse? They stepped back. Brandon lowered himself to the curb. The concrete felt rough through his jeans. He'd sat in worse places, waited in worse conditions, but never on his own property, never surrounded by his own neighbors, all convinced he was a criminal. Officers, how long is this going to take? His voice stayed even, controlled. As long as it takes, sir. Mitchell pulled out his phone. I'm calling the title company. We'll verify ownership. It's Saturday. They're closed. Then we'll call the previous owners, the Harrisons. They're in assisted living. They're both over 80. You're going to bother them on a weekend because a neighbor made an assumption? Mitchell's jaw tightened. Sir, your attitude isn't helping your situation. Your situation, As if Brandon had created this, as if his presence here in this neighborhood was the problem. Caroline stood on her lawn, arms crossed. Victorious. She'd called the police on a black man, and they'd responded exactly as she expected. He was on the curb. They were investigating him. Everything was right in her world. Brandon's phone buzzed in his pocket. Mitchell had returned his wallet but kept his phone. The buzzing continued. 3 times. 4. Someone was trying to reach him. Someone who knew where he was supposed to be. Someone who wouldn't stop calling until he answered. Brandon smiled. Just slightly. "Officer Mitchell?" His voice carried a new tone. Not defiant, not angry. Something else. "You might want to answer that phone." Mitchell ignored him. He was already scrolling through his own phone, searching for the Harrison family's contact information. Officer Davis stood behind Brandon, positioned like he expected trouble. The phone in Mitchell's hand buzzed again. The screen lit up. Caller ID showed USMS, Agent Hayes. Mitchell frowned, swiped to decline. The phone rang again immediately. Same caller. "Persistent," Mitchell muttered. He declined again. Brandon's smile widened slightly. "She's not going to stop." "Who?" "The person calling my phone. You might want to answer it." Mitchell stared at the phone. It rang a 3rd time. His irritation flickered across his face. He swiped to answer, speaker on. "Hello?" A woman's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "This is Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Rachel Hayes. Who am I speaking with, and why do you have Deputy Marshal Noble's phone?" The street went quiet. Mitchell's face changed. Confusion first, then something harder to read. "This is Detective James Mitchell, Oakwood Heights Police Department. I'm conducting an investigation." "An investigation into what?" Hayes didn't let him finish. "And why are you in possession of a federal law enforcement officer's phone?" "Ma'am, I'm responding to a burglary call." "The individual in question?" "Deputy Marshal Brandon Noble," Hayes interrupted. 6'1". Black male. Approximately 38 years old. Currently on administrative leave following the closure of a high-profile fugitive case. Is that who you're investigating for burglary? Mitchell looked at Brandon. Really looked at him this time. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to verify. His badge number is 4521. He's been with the Marshal's service for 15 years. 3 commendations. Currently assigned to the Eastern District. He purchased property at 412 Maple Drive 3 weeks ago. Public record, which you could have checked in 30 seconds instead of detaining a federal officer on his own lawn." The phone felt heavy in Mitchell's hand. His face had gone pale. Brandon stood up slowly from the curb, brushed off his jeans, extended his hand toward Mitchell. "My phone, please." Mitchell handed it over. No argument this time. Brandon took it but didn't step back. "Detective, would you like to see inside my house now, or should we continue this performance for my neighbors?" Caroline's voice shattered the moment. "He's lying. U.S. Marshal? That's ridiculous. He's making this up." Brandon turned to face her. His expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still controlled, but something different lived in his eyes now. "Mrs. Sullivan, is it?" His voice carried across the lawn, quiet but clear. "I've waved at you 4 times in the past 3 weeks. You've photographed my car 6 times. You posted about suspicious activity on the neighborhood Facebook group. I have screenshots. Would you like to see them?" Caroline's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was just being cautious." "You were being racist." Brandon said it simply. A fact. Like saying the sky was blue. "You saw a black man and assumed criminal. You never asked. Never introduced yourself. You just called the police." "I have a right to feel safe in my neighborhood. You have a right to not weaponize police against innocent people." Brandon pulled out his wallet, flipped it open. The badge was there, tucked behind his driver's license. Deputy U.S. Marshal. Badge number 4521, just like Hayes had said. Mitchell stared at it. His hand had moved away from his belt, away from his weapon. "Sir, Marshal Noble, I apologize. We were responding to a call." "You were responding to a white woman's fear." Brandon's voice stayed level. "And you never questioned it. You saw me, saw my skin color, and assumed I was the threat." A black SUV pulled up behind the patrol cars. Government plates, tinted windows. The door opened and Agent Rachel Hayes stepped out. She was everything Caroline Sullivan wasn't. Confident, direct, unimpressed by the suburban theater playing out before her. Hayes was black, 40-something, hair pulled back in a tight bun. Suit that probably cost more than Caroline's yoga outfit, but worn for function, not fashion. Her credentials hung from her neck. Her presence commanded the space immediately. "Noble." She nodded at Brandon. "You okay?" "I've been better." Hayes turned to Mitchell. "Detective, Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Rachel Hayes. Want to explain why my colleague was detained on his own property." Mitchell's professional mask slipped. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call reporting a burglary in progress. And in the 45 minutes since you arrived, did you verify property records? Contact the title company? Check county records online? Any actual investigation?" Mitchell said nothing. "Or did you just see a black man and decide he must be guilty?" Hayes let the question hang. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a civil rights violation. Multiple violations, actually." Officer Davis shifted uncomfortably. His hand had long since moved away from his weapon. He looked young suddenly, unprepared for this conversation. Hayes wasn't finished. "Let me guess. You ran his ID, found nothing. But you still made him wait. Still treated him like a suspect. Still humiliated him in front of his neighbors. We were being thorough. You were being biased." Hayes stepped closer to Mitchell. Not threatening, just factual. "Deputy Noble has been moving into this house for 3 weeks, in broad daylight, carrying clearly labeled boxes, normal homeowner behavior, but nobody in this neighborhood bothered to introduce themselves or ask questions. They just assumed, and you validated those assumptions." Caroline tried again. "How was I supposed to know he's a marshal? He doesn't look—" "Doesn't look like what, Mrs. Sullivan?" Hayes turned her attention to Caroline now. "Doesn't look like law enforcement? Doesn't look like he belongs in this neighborhood? Finish that sentence for me." Caroline's face flushed. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Brandon spoke quietly. "You meant exactly what you said. You've been watching me for weeks. You never once considered that I might actually live here, because in your mind, people who look like me don't belong in places like this." Gregory Sullivan finally spoke. His voice came out defensive. "Now wait a minute. My wife was trying to protect the neighborhood. Your wife filed a false police report." Hayes pulled out her phone, pulled up notes. "According to county records, Caroline Sullivan has called police 14 times in the past 12 months. 13 of those calls involved people of color, landscapers, delivery drivers, contractors. Want to guess how many resulted in actual crimes?" Silence. 0. Hayes let that sink in. "Not one. But she keeps calling, and you keep responding, and innocent people keep getting harassed." The crowd had grown quieter. Some neighbors had drifted back inside. Others stood frozen, realizing their entertainment had become something uglier, something they'd participated in. Mrs. Peterson lowered her phone, stopped recording. Her face showed discomfort now, not suspicion. Mr. Davies cleared his throat. "We didn't know." "You didn't ask." Brandon cut him off. "That's the problem. You saw me. You had questions. But instead of introducing yourselves like neighbors, you whispered. You watched. You assumed the worst." The Carter family's father stepped forward again. This time, Officer Davis didn't stop him. Mr. Noble, I'm David Carter. This is my wife, Susan. We live 2 doors down. He extended his hand. I'm sorry this happened. We should have said something earlier. We understand what this is. Brandon shook his hand. The first friendly gesture he'd received on this street. Hayes turned back to Mitchell. Lieutenant Anderson is on his way. Your supervisor. He and I are going to have a conversation about how this department responds to calls involving people of color. In the meantime, Deputy Noble is going inside his house. His house. And if you have any objection to that, we can make this a federal incident right now. Mitchell shook his head quickly. No objection, ma'am. Good. Hayes gestured to Brandon. Your key still work, or did they confiscate that too? Brandon held up his key, still in his hand, where it had been the entire time. Never let it go. He walked to his front door, inserted the key. It turned smoothly. The door opened. Inside, moving boxes sat exactly where he'd left them. His furniture, his belongings, his life. He turned back to the crowd, to Caroline, to Mitchell, to all of them. Welcome to the neighborhood, he said. The words tasted bitter. Then he stepped inside. Hayes followed. The door closed behind them. Outside, the street remained quiet. Caroline stood on her lawn, arms wrapped around herself. Gregory beside her, looking uncertain for the first time. Mitchell and Davis exchanged glances. Both knew what came next. Reports, investigations, consequences. The neighbors began drifting away. The show was over, but the reckoning had just begun. Inside, Brandon leaned against the closed door, his calm facade cracked, hands shaking slightly, adrenaline finally catching up. Hayes noticed. She always noticed. You good? No. Brandon's voice came out rough. But I will be. She walked through his living room, noted the boxes stacked neatly, the furniture arranged carefully, the family photos on the mantel, a life interrupted by ignorance. How long were you out there before I called? 45 minutes, give or take. Hayes swore under her breath. 45 minutes on your own lawn. Jesus, Noble. Brandon moved to the window. Outside, the crowd was dispersing, slowly, reluctantly. Caroline still stood frozen on her lawn. Mitchell and Davis were conferring by their patrol car. Both looked shaken. She's been watching me for weeks, Brandon said. Every time I came to move stuff in. Every time. And she never once thought to just ask. Because asking would require seeing you as human. Hayes joined him at the window. Easier to see a threat. A third patrol car arrived. Lieutenant Stephen Anderson emerged. Older. Gray at the temples. 25 years on the force, if Brandon had to guess. The kind of cop who'd seen everything and assumed he knew everything. Anderson spoke with Mitchell. Even through the window, Brandon could see Mitchell's body language change. Defensive, explanatory, gesturing toward the house. Anderson's face darkened as he listened. Hayes pulled out her phone. Time to make this official. She stepped onto the front porch. Brandon followed. The street's attention snapped back to them immediately. Lieutenant Anderson? Hayes called out. Her voice carried authority that made Anderson turn. Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Rachel Hayes, we need to talk. Anderson approached, his stride confident until he got close enough to see Hayes's credentials. Then he slowed, recalculating. Ma'am, I understand there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Hayes repeated the word like it tasted bad. Is that what you call detaining a federal law enforcement officer without cause for 3/4 of an hour? My officers responded to a burglary call. Your officers violated Deputy Noble's Fourth Amendment rights. Hayes wasn't raising her voice. Didn't need to. unlawful detention, illegal search of his person, seizure of his property, implied threats when he exercised his constitutional rights. All of it on video, I'm sure. Anderson glanced at the neighbors. Several phones were still visible, recording everything. Ma'am, if Deputy Noble had identified himself, he shouldn't have to. Brandon stepped forward now. I was standing at my own front door with my own key. I broke no laws. I gave no probable cause, but because Mrs. Sullivan called and said I looked suspicious, your officers assumed I was guilty. Anderson's jaw tightened. Sir, we have to respond to all calls. But you don't have to violate people's rights. Brandon pulled out his phone, opened his photos, turned the screen toward Anderson. These are screenshots from the neighborhood Facebook group. Mrs. Sullivan has posted about me 6 times in 3 weeks. Suspicious vehicle. Unknown person. Possible criminal activity. All while I was legally moving into my own house. He swiped to the next image. Here's her post from 4 days ago. Dark-skinned male repeatedly visiting Harrison property. Recommend increased patrols. Dark-skinned male. Not person. Not neighbor. Dark-skinned male. Anderson looked at the phone. His expression shifted. Not quite shame, but something adjacent to it. Hayes continued. Lieutenant, I'm filing a formal complaint with your department and with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. This isn't just about today. This is about a pattern of discriminatory policing that puts innocent people at risk. That's not necessary, Anderson started. It absolutely is necessary. Hayes cut him off. Because if it happened to a U.S. Marshal with 15 years of service, what happens to regular citizens who don't have a badge? What happens to the black teenager walking home, the Latino contractor doing his job, the Asian family moving into the neighborhood? The Carter family was still on their porch. Susan Carter nodded slightly. David Carter's face showed recognition. They'd lived this too. Brandon turned to Caroline. She'd inched closer during the conversation, still defiant despite everything. Mrs. Sullivan, do you want to know what I do for a living? His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. I hunt fugitives, people who've committed actual crimes, murder, assault, human trafficking. I've tracked down over 100 in my career. Caroline's face paled. I've been shot at, stabbed once, had my car rammed by a suspect trying to escape. I've testified in federal court against cartel leaders who put prices on my head. Brandon took a step toward her. She stepped back reflexively. But the most afraid I've been in years was 45 minutes ago. On my own lawn, surrounded by police. Because I know how this ends for people who look like me. His voice dropped lower, harder. You could have killed me today, Mrs. Sullivan. Not with your hands, but with your assumptions. One wrong move, one officer who's too nervous, one moment of panic, and I'd be a hashtag instead of a neighbor. Caroline's mouth trembled. I didn't mean... You never do. Brandon turned away from her, done with the conversation. None of you ever mean it, but people still end up dead. Hayes stepped between them, professional again. Lieutenant Anderson, Officers Mitchell and Davis are to report to your station immediately. They're on administrative leave pending investigation, non-negotiable. Anderson looked like he wanted to argue. He didn't. Yes, ma'am. Deputy Noble and I will be filing our reports within the hour. Expect contact from the DOJ within 48 hours. Hayes glanced at Caroline. Mrs. Sullivan, you should probably call a lawyer. Filing a false police report is a crime. Using police to harass someone based on race violates federal civil rights law. You're exposed legally, significantly. Caroline's defiance crumbled. I was just trying to protect... You were trying to control, Brandon's voice cut through. Control who lives here, who belongs here. Who gets to exist in your space without being questioned? He looked around at the remaining neighbors, at Mrs. Peterson, who couldn't meet his eyes, at Mr. Davies, who'd gone quiet, at the young couple who'd watched everything unfold. I'm a deputy U.S. Marshal. I have a badge. I have power. I have resources. His words landed heavy, final. And it still took 45 minutes and a phone call from my supervisor to convince you I belonged in my own house. Think about that. Really think about it. He turned and walked back inside. Hayes followed. This time, when the door closed, it sounded different. Not like an ending, like a beginning. The videos went viral within 24 hours. Mrs. Peterson's recording, Mr. Davies' footage, 3 other neighbors who'd filmed everything. By Sunday afternoon, the views climbed past 4 million. The comments were brutal. She really called the cops on a U.S. Marshal at his own house. The caucasity is unreal. Karen of the Year award goes to... Local news arrived Monday morning. Channel 5 reporter Diana Williams knocked on doors along Maple Drive. Most neighbors suddenly had no comment. The Carter family spoke on camera. "We've lived here 6 years," David Carter said. "We've experienced this too. The looks, the assumptions we don't belong, it's real." Diana Williams stood in front of Brandon's house for the broadcast. "Federal officer detained at his own home. Questions tonight about racial profiling in this exclusive suburb." Lieutenant Anderson held a press conference Monday afternoon. He stood behind a podium, uncomfortable in his dress uniform. The police chief flanked one side, the department's lawyer on the other. "After reviewing the incident, we've taken immediate action," Anderson read from prepared notes. "Detective James Mitchell and Officer Robert Davis are on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation." A reporter called out, "Will they be terminated?" "That determination will follow our investigation's completion." "What about the civil rights complaint?" Anderson's jaw clenched. "We're cooperating fully with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division." The press conference lasted 12 minutes. Anderson avoided the hard questions. Left quickly. At her house, Caroline Sullivan watched through barely open curtains. Her phone rang constantly. Her real estate firm called first. Her boss's voice tight with controlled anger. "Caroline, we need to discuss your social media presence." Then friends, some supportive, most suddenly distant, unavailable for lunch. Then threats, anonymous messages flooding Facebook, Instagram, email. Vile things that made her hands shake. She deleted everything, went private. But screenshots lived forever. Gregory sat in the living room scrolling his phone, his face darkened with each swipe. "They're calling for boycotts of my business. My clients are threatening to drop me." "It's not fair," Caroline whispered. "I was just..." "Just what?" Gregory looked up. "Protecting the neighborhood from a federal officer at his own house?" "I didn't know." "You didn't ask. That's the problem." His words landed hard. "And now we're both paying for it." Their daughter Emma came downstairs, 17, eyes red from crying. "Mom, do you know what they're saying at school?" Her voice cracked. "People are sending me the videos, asking if we're racist." "Honey, I'm not..." "You called the cops on a black man for opening his own door." Emma's anger showed through. "How is that not racist?" Caroline had no answer. Tuesday morning brought an email from her firm. Professional. Cold. "Dear Caroline, effective immediately, we are terminating your employment. Your actions created liability concerns and damaged our reputation. Collect your items by Wednesday." 22 years. Gone in 2 sentences. Gregory received similar news. 3 clients pulled contracts. His largest account sent a message. "We can no longer maintain our business relationship." The Oakwood Heights HOA Facebook group exploded. Emergency meeting called. Topic: recent events and community standards. Someone created an unauthorized poll. Should the HOA take action regarding the Maple Drive incident? Yes, 73%. No, 15%. Unsure, 12%. The comments were worse. She made our neighborhood look bad. Property values will tank because of this. We need distance immediately. Nobody defended her. Caroline stared out her window toward Brandon's house, lights on. He was home, living his life, while hers collapsed. 3 doors away. Might as well be 3 worlds. She'd created this distance, with assumptions, fear, refusal to see a neighbor instead of a threat. The gap felt impossible to cross now. 2 weeks after the incident, Brandon filed the lawsuit. Federal Court, Eastern District, civil rights violation under 42 U.S.C. Sector 1983. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Caroline Sullivan, Gregory Sullivan, Oakwood Heights Police Department, all named as defendants. The complaint laid out everything: timeline of events, pattern of behavior, damages sought. Brandon's attorney was thorough, meticulous. Every Facebook post, every photo Caroline had taken, every police call she'd made in the past year. 14 calls total, 13 involving people of color, 0 resulting in actual crimes. The pattern was undeniable. The police department settled within days. Their lawyers knew a losing case when they saw one. $350,000 to Brandon. Mandatory bias training for all officers. Policy changes for responding to suspicious person calls. Body cameras required, no exceptions. Mitchell and Davis were terminated. No appeal, no second chances. Anderson was demoted to patrol officer, 6-month suspension without pay. His pension remained intact, but his authority was gone. The department issued a public apology, read by the police chief at a community meeting. The words sounded hollow, performative. But they were on record now. Caroline and Gregory didn't settle. Their attorney advised it, strongly. This case is a loser. The evidence is overwhelming. Settle now, minimize damage. Caroline refused. I won't admit to being racist. I was protecting my neighborhood. So they went to trial. Judge Patricia Moore presided, 62 years old, black, 20 years on the federal bench, known for her sharp questions and 0 tolerance for nonsense. The trial began on a cold morning in November, 6 months after the incident on Maple Drive. Brandon sat at the plaintiff's table, suit and tie, clean cut, professional. He looked exactly like what he was, a federal law enforcement officer. Caroline sat across the aisle. She'd lost weight. Stress had carved lines around her eyes. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the exhaustion. Gregory sat beside her, staring straight ahead. Their marriage was already fracturing. This trial was just making it public. Brandon's attorney opened strong. This case is about assumptions, about what happens when someone sees a black man and immediately thinks criminal. Deputy Marshal Noble was moving into his own home, his own property, legally purchased. But Mrs. Sullivan saw his skin color and called the police. She displayed the Facebook posts on a large screen. Caroline's words, blown up for the jury to read. Dark-skinned male repeatedly visiting Harrison property. Suspicious vehicle, same car, different times. Unknown person lurking around neighborhood. Deputy Noble waved at Mrs. Sullivan 4 times. She never waved back, never introduced herself, never asked a single question. She just watched, photographed, and called the police. The attorney paused. Let that sink in. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about neighborhood safety. This is about who Mrs. Sullivan believed belonged in her neighborhood and who didn't. Caroline's attorney tried damage control during his opening. My client was concerned. She'd never seen this individual before. The previous owners hadn't mentioned selling. She was being cautious, not racist. Judge Moore's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. Brandon testified first, his voice steady, factual. He recounted every detail, the moment Caroline shouted, the police arrival, the 45 minutes on his own lawn. "I've been a U.S. Marshal for 15 years, he said. "I've faced armed fugitives, dangerous criminals. But I've never felt as powerless as I did that morning, standing at my own door, being treated like a suspect in front of my neighbors." Caroline's attorney cross-examined. "Deputy Noble, isn't it true you were dressed casually? Hoodie and baseball cap?" "I was dressed like a homeowner moving boxes on a Saturday morning." "But you could see how that might look suspicious." "Suspicious to whom?" Brandon leaned forward slightly. "To someone who sees a black man and assumes criminal?" "Yes." "To someone who sees a neighbor?" "No." The attorney tried again. "You never identified yourself as a marshal." "I shouldn't have to. I was on my own property, committing no crime. The Fourth Amendment doesn't require me to prove my innocence to satisfy someone's racist assumptions." Judge Moore nodded slightly. Point to Brandon. Expert witnesses followed. Dr. Jennifer Washington, psychologist specializing in implicit bias. "Mrs. Sullivan's pattern of behavior demonstrates clear racial bias," Dr. Washington testified. 14 police calls, 13 targeting people of color. This isn't coincidence. This is systematic. The defense called character witnesses, neighbors who claimed Caroline was always helpful and community-minded. Brandon's attorney destroyed them on cross-examination. "Did Mrs. Sullivan ever call police on white contractors?" I don't recall." "Did she ever photograph white visitors to the neighborhood?" "Not that I know of." "So her concern only activated for people of color?" Silence. Caroline took the stand against her attorney's advice. She couldn't stay quiet. Couldn't let the accusation stand without defending herself. It was a disaster. "Mrs. Sullivan, you posted that Deputy Noble was a dark-skinned male. Why not just say man or person?" "I was being descriptive." "You were being racial. You made his skin color the defining characteristic." Caroline's face flushed. "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" Judge Moore interjected. "Explain to this court why a man's skin color was relevant to whether he belonged at that house." Caroline stammered. He looked out of place." "Out of place how?" The silence stretched. Caroline had no answer that wasn't racist. Brandon's attorney continued. "Mrs. Sullivan, in your deposition you said you'd never seen him before. But Deputy Noble testified he waved at you 4 times. Was he lying?" "No, but I didn't know who he was." "You didn't ask. You could have walked over, introduced yourself, said, 'Hi, are you the new neighbor?' But you didn't. Why?" Another silence. Another, "Because you'd already decided who he was, what he was, based solely on his appearance." The jury deliberated 3 hours. They returned with a verdict. Liable on all counts. Compensatory damages, $500,000. Punitive damages, $1.2 million. Caroline gasped audibly. Gregory's face went pale. Judge Moore addressed them directly from the bench. "Mrs. Sullivan, you weaponized police against an innocent man. You used your privilege and your fear to endanger someone's life. This court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior." She paused. Let the weight settle. "Your actions represent everything wrong with assumptions based on race. You saw a black man and assumed criminality. The consequences of such assumptions can be fatal. Today, they're merely financial. Consider yourself fortunate." The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Brandon stood at the microphone, Hayes beside him. "This verdict isn't just about me," he said. "It's about every black person who's been questioned in their own neighborhood. Every person of color who's been treated as suspicious for simply existing. The law won today. But the fight isn't over." Diana Williams asked the final question. "What message do you hope this sends?" Brandon looked directly at the camera. See people, not stereotypes. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions. And understand that calling the police on someone isn't a neutral act. It can have deadly consequences. Mrs. Sullivan is lucky I'm here to file a lawsuit. Others haven't been so fortunate. The verdict made national news that night. Caroline and Gregory's faces broadcast across every major network. The verdict amount scrolled beneath, $1.7 million. Justice delivered. 6 months later, Brandon stood in his backyard. The garden he'd planted had bloomed. Tomatoes ripened on the vine. Herbs filled the air with their scent. The fence he'd painted gleamed white in the afternoon sun. His home. Finally. The smell of burgers drifted from the grill. Voices filled the yard. Laughter. Conversation. Life. David and Susan Carter arrived first, carrying a homemade pie. Their kids ran straight to the swing set Brandon had installed last month. Hayes showed up with a case of beer and her trademark directness. Nice place, Noble. About time you let people see it. More neighbors filtered in. The new families who'd moved in after the trial. Younger, diverse, open. The old guard had mostly left. Property values dipped briefly after the news coverage, then recovered stronger. Oakwood Heights was changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing. Mrs. Peterson knocked hesitantly at the gate. Brandon saw her through the fence, paused, then opened it. I know I'm probably not welcome, she said quietly. But I wanted to apologize. For real this time. Not because lawyers told me to. Brandon studied her face. Saw genuine remorse, not performance, not legal strategy. Real discomfort with who she'd been. Come in, he said. She cried when she saw the garden. You've made it beautiful. I'm trying. The conversation at the grill turned to his new role. Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal now, promoted 3 months ago. But the promotion came with a different responsibility. Brandon traveled to police academies across the country, teaching, training, using his story as a case study in what not to do. I tell them about that morning, he said to the group gathered around. About standing at my own door. About feeling powerless despite my badge, my training, my authority. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Hayes raised her beer. To using pain as a teaching tool. Everyone drank to that. The Sullivans were gone now. Divorced. House sold to pay the judgment. Caroline moved to another state. Gregory's business never recovered. Their daughter Emma had reached out once. A letter, handwritten, apologizing for her mother, trying to understand how she'd been raised in such blindness. Brandon had written back, brief but kind. You're not responsible for your parents' choices, only your own. The HOA had transformed completely. New board, new rules, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all residents. A community fund dedicated to civil rights organizations. Oakwood Heights became a case study. Not for what to be, but for what happens when comfortable people are forced to confront uncomfortable truths. The sun began setting. Orange and pink streaked across the sky. Brandon's guests lingered, not wanting the evening to end. David Carter pulled Brandon aside. You know what you did, right? You didn't just win a lawsuit. You changed this place. I shouldn't have had to. No. But you did. And others will benefit from it. Brandon looked around his yard, at the people gathered, at the home he'd fought to claim. This was supposed to be simple. Buy a house, move in, live. Instead, it became a battle, a lawsuit, a national news story. But standing here now, surrounded by genuine neighbors and real community, he felt something shift. Not closure. The anger still lived in him, the humiliation, the fear of what could have happened, but also hope, possibility, change. He stepped onto his porch, raised his voice to address the crowd. Thank you all for coming, for being here, for making this feel like home. The conversations quieted. Faces turned toward him. 6 months ago, I was detained at this door, 45 minutes on my own lawn, treated like a criminal by my own neighbors. The weight of it hung in the air. But I had resources, a badge, legal knowledge, influential colleagues. Most people don't. Most people don't get justice. They get trauma and move on. He paused. Let that truth settle. So I'm asking you, all of you, when you see someone who doesn't fit your idea of who belongs somewhere, stop. Question your assumptions. Ask yourself what you're really seeing. Hayes nodded. Others murmured agreement. Don't just watch this story and feel good because the bad guys lost. Ask yourself, would I have done what Caroline Sullivan did? Would I have stayed silent like my other neighbors? Or would I have walked over and said hello? The question hung unanswered, deliberately. Brandon looked directly at the phone, recording his words. Someone would post this. It would circulate. That was fine. That was the point. If this story made you angry, good. Channel that anger into action. Question your own biases. Speak up when you see injustice. Be the neighbor who introduces themselves instead of calling the police. He smiled slightly, genuinely. Subscribe to Black Voices Uncut. Hear more stories like this. Share this if it made you think. Comment with your experiences. Let's keep this conversation going. The screen faded to text. 350 similar incidents reported last year in U.S. suburbs. How many ended in justice? More importantly, how many never got reported at all? Final image, Brandon at his front door, key in hand, looking at the camera. His voice, quiet but firm. The next time you see someone who doesn't fit, ask yourself, what am I really seeing, and what am I missing? Justice served, but the fight continues. Don't just watch, act.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.